Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and it's time for another garden tour brought to you by my sponsor, Vessi Seeds. If you want to see what they're all about, check out the little ad at the end of the video and use my coupon code if you want to get free shipping. It's the middle of May 2023, and there's a lot of changes that have happened in the garden. I'm a little bit late making this video. I like to do that the first or second week of the month, but anyway, we got there. I had made a lot of changes in my garden between last fall and now. And I was trying to get everything just right for this video. And it's not perfect, but we're close. So with no further ado, let's get out there and let me show you everything that's going on in the garden. Here, I thought I'd just do an overhead view, just so you can see how everything's laid out now, right? I got the sand with all the different vegetables all along there. With a nice pond down there, central in the garden, so I can, use it to water anything. It's not too hard to get at. And then I've got all the fruit over there. Okay, let's start with pond number one. I decided to keep the pond. One of my viewers said I was going to fill this in with, I dug a hole to make my new pond in my garden, and I was going to put all that stuff in here. One of my viewers says, why don't you have two ponds? And I said, that's easier. so what I did was I bought 30 rosy red minnows. They're like these tiny little fish, like 1.5 inches long. And I thought I'd make this a minnow pond. There's still, I think, 3 goldfish in this pond. I used a minnow trap and caught all the goldfish, but I have 2 dark ones that I don't recall being in the minnow trap. And I can see over there, it's not obvious on camera, but there's one goldfish. Orange goldfish over there. So there's 3 goldfish in here, and I put a whole bunch of little minnows in here. And ever since I've done that, I've only ever seen 3 at a time. So either they're all good at hiding all the time, and rosy red minnows are sort of famous for not hiding. They kind of just roam around a lot. Or the 3 goldfish in this pond killed all the minnows. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to keep this pond. I might do a few things. I don't know what I'm going to do with this, or just leave it. I don't know. I'd like to get some more cattails growing in here and stuff like that, but I'd like this to be a minnow pond, but I got to find a type of minnow that doesn't get eaten by things. Here we are at the entrance of the garden. I took this bed, and I had a different configuration for this bed last year. I simplified it, made it a little bit lower, and made it come this way a little bit more so I can get more garden. So it's almost 4 feet across. So it's a bit of a pain to access the other side because I can't really access it from that side. But, it's just one bed, so it's no big deal. And I planted something here that doesn't need regular maintenance, right? So this is just, it's all potatoes, the whole thing. Potatoes about that deep, 6-8 inches deep, covered in about 6 inches of leaves. Done, right? All planted. And everything I've planted in the garden, I've done using my dandelion planting schedule. Some things when you see the dandelion green, some things when you see the yellow flowers, and then the most tender things when you see the dandelion flowers turn white, which has not happened yet. It's still quite cold. We had frost this morning. We had frost yesterday morning, right? I think it's May 18th or 19th. I think it's May 19th today as I film this. Which is quite, sorry about that. Sorry for being so late making this garden tour. But anyway, we're still getting frost. It's May 19th. And if you look at any calendar for where I live, it says this is well past the last frost date, which it isn't. Which is why I don't use calendars and frost dates, as they don't work for me. So let's start over here. Here I've got some Swiss chard. Okay, these are really tightly planted. I started them really early. Okay, sort of ahead of schedule. When you saw the dandelion greens, I planted them under a dome, and they're planted kind of closely together, right? At some point, I'll pluck a bunch out, and I'll spread them out over this whole area. That's about the amount of Swiss chard my family likes. They're not crazy about it. I like it the most. They'll eat it, but they're not crazy about it, so I don't grow a lot. I just grow enough for, we like to have, I really like having Swiss chard with fish and chips. I think it goes really, the acidity, it's got that sharp taste, and it goes good with the French fries and the batter and all that fat, right? So yeah, this is Swiss chard. That's growing good. I've planted Brussels sprouts here. I just planted those a couple days ago, so that'll be a little while before they come up. Over here, under a dome really early, I planted leeks, and you can see them. That's a leek right there. Okay, there's some weeds and stuff like that, some things I got to deal with, but there's leeks planted here, and they were underneath that dome. So at some point I got to weed this, of course, but also when they're much bigger, I will pluck some of them out and I'll distribute the leeks over this entire end of the garden and mulch it all up, right? So that's what I'll do with that. Right here we got all kinds of nice garlic growing great. These are all garlic that were 6 inches high before winter, right? They grew a lot in the fall. So they're doing fine. Over here I've got, this is like tatsoi or pak choi, or it's basically like an Asian green, you know. So I planted these again with the dandelions turn yellow, right? And they're growing great. A little bit of I just saw one right there, a little bit of flea beetle stuff going on. I'm going away for the weekend, going fishing this weekend. I gotta hit these with some of that Safer's End-All that I like to use before I go, because they're really vulnerable at this stage, right? And these first 2 petals are the energy collectors for the plant, so you don't want bugs at them. Let's see how much damage this one's had, right? Because that damage reduces the plant's ability to gather energy from the sun and get everything going. Got another variety of Asian green here. You can see it's a deeper color of green. Again, the flea beetle damage, right? Just always got them right. I forgot these beds need to be mulched. That's another thing I got to do before I go. So I'll show you my sort of mulching system as we go along here. But anyway, I got peas growing here, right? And these beds, this is where I had the winter rye. You can see a bit of it poking up along the side. You just pull that when you see it, right? Some of the stuff's coming up from the sides. That's going to happen. Nothing's perfect, right? People spend too much time in gardening looking for perfect solutions. Perfect solution to weeds. Perfect solution to weeds is to pull them, right? Pull them when you see them. Anyway, I mean, you can see it's not inundated. The grass does not come back, right? So the peas are coming up great. That's all on schedule. Egyptian walking onions over here, right? A lot of the ones I planted last fall didn't make it. So I think September is maybe a good time to move Egyptian walking onions, but once you get into October, November, I don't think the roots, I think it's too cold for everything to get well established enough to survive the winter. Because I would say at least 50% of the Egyptian walking onions I planted in this bed did not come up in the spring, right? So I had to sort of move some other ones and spread them out a little bit. But they'll be fine, right? They'll be fine. These things grow great. French sorrel growing, bloody dock growing. I got lettuce over here, right? It's coming up pretty good. Okay, it's not edible yet. I have not been using, see, I can see I got some domes in the garden. All I did this year with my domes is I put them over the bed until I saw that the plants were up. Then I took them off and used them elsewhere. So you don't get as much growth because the beds are colder that way, but there's zero risk of them overheating, and you don't have to water them as much because the rain can get at them. So as long as you're without, as long as you're okay with waiting for things to happen a little longer, it's actually an easier way to use the domes. A lot of the things in the garden, I use even the peas, I use the domes to germinate them. So the dome would be on for like 1 week, then I'd see a little green, take the dome off. Everything I got planted here can handle frost, right? We had a frost this morning, we had frost yesterday morning, everything's fine, right? A couple weeds here. But yeah, so this lettuce is coming up great. I think this is just a romaine type thing. That's what my wife likes, right? Lots of garlic here, doing great. Over here we've got spinach. Again, this is a very early planting of spinach. Same technique. There's a little snail there. How dare you? Right, so we got some spinach here. This bed here is, I just planted spinach just the other day, so it hasn't even germinated yet. It's the spinach on the sides. Down the center row I got all these garbage. This is just, not garbage bag, leaf bags. This is just to keep anything from growing. So down the center I'm going to plant beans when it's warm enough. It's certainly not warm enough for beans yet. Okay, so I'm going to have pole beans. They're going to grow nice and high. And what are they going to do? They're going to put a little shade, right? That way's west, that way's east. Okay, so in the morning, this side will be in the shade. In the afternoon, this side will be in the shade. right? So this is my second planting of spinach, which will be growing deeper into summer, right? We'll be getting a little bit of shade, right? Because spinach doesn't like too much heat, or it goes to seed, it bolts, right? So that's my little trick for growing spinach. Over here, you're wondering what are all the bags doing there if you don't know, right? I'm going to be planting potatoes on either side of the peas, which is a technique I've done for years. It works great. I mean, sure, they're going to have a bit of shade to contend with, right? But it'll work out fine. It'll just work out. These potatoes will get enough sun that they're going to do great. And the timing is you don't pick the potatoes until the peas are completely done, right? And if it's the case that the peas are done while the potatoes are still growing, you rip down the foliage so there's much sun as possible can get at your potato plants, right? Over here we've got this is beets, right? Some nice beets here. This shredded so wood shavings, this is from last year. I bought a bale of wood shavings because I had no mulch last summer. I just wasn't diligent in collecting mulch, right? This year I was. So I got lots of different sources of mulch. I'm not going to run out. Talk about a little bit about that later. Yeah, this is last year's wood shavings that were growing on a bed over there. I just scraped them all off, put them in a bucket, and then I planted them between the rows of these beets. Right? Again, I'd used the dome to get the beets germinated. Then I took it off. Last year I was growing beets somewhere on the side of the garden, and I had really nice beets growing. Like, you know, I had the dome on full time, and I had it vented and some things like that, but sometimes you just don't, you know, the vents fail or whatever. And there was one day I left the dome on, it was a really hot sunny day, and it killed a whole bunch of them. So I said, what's the point? Why not just be patient and let things happen? So that's what I've done. Got carrots over here. They're just starting to come up. I don't know if you can see that, right? Carrots right there. All right, so they're just beginning to come up. Again, planted when the dandelions turn yellow, right? All the carrots. And I got potatoes over there. Over here, there's nothing planted yet. This is going to be tomatoes or peppers or something like that. Same with this bed. Maybe this will be cucumbers. One of these will be cucumbers. One of these will be tomatoes, right? So it's still not warm enough to plant those things, so I'm just leaving the beds alone, right? I got enough to do. I'll deal with that later. You see there's some weeds and stuff like that. It's just been going wild, right? Just leaving it alone. I got parsnips here. You can see they're coming in. They're starting to put out their second leaves. Right, these were planted. This was the first thing I planted, right? As soon as the soil could be worked, I planted these, even before I saw dandelion greens, because parsnip seeds are invincible, and parsnips are invincible. They're basically freeze-proof. I mean, they freeze, but then they just thaw out and go on with their lives, as far as I can tell. Over here, I've got kale, different kinds of kale, and broccolini. I can't really tell the one from the other. I got 4 rows of my own kale, and they're all up. They're really tiny, right? They're just starting, right? And then over here, I've got, what's it called? Prism kale from Bessie's. And here I've got the artwork broccolini, or vice versa. I can't remember. I can't remember which one's which. Okay, so I've got a lot planted here. At some point in the season, just like I do every year, I'll pluck a whole bunch of these plants out and probably move them into one of my garlic beds, because the garlic, you know, sometime later in the season, the garlic is all going to be pulled, right? By early August, all the garlic's gone. So it makes sense in like early July, if your kale's big enough, to move some of it into your garlic bed, right? And that way, once the garlic's gone, right? Kale can do a lot of growing in September. They love the September growing conditions. So, yeah, why not just do that, right? And get 2, even though I plant 1 bed of kale, by the end of the growing season, I'll have 2, maybe even 3 beds of kale in the garden. I got parsnips over here, planted them the same day as the other parsnips. All along here, look at the way I set these beds up. It's different than last year, right? But this is all potatoes. All potatoes. I'm hoping it gets enough light to grow well. Just giant potato garden. Raspberries here with my secondary fence, hoping for the first time ever. Now these were just moved. I moved these in the fall, but they seem to be coming in. I mean, I have to say, I moved all my fruit bushes and things like that, or a lot of them. I moved a lot of fruit plants, trees and blueberry bushes and raspberry bushes in the fall, because I'd read that it's a good time to move them, and the ideal time to move them is in the fall, contrary to common wisdom, because the roots actually grow in the fall, and they get a bit of a jump start in the spring that way. So that's what I did with these raspberries, and look, they're all doing great, right? And I'm hoping that, so I used to have a row of raspberries along here, and every year a rabbit would find its way through the fence. I'm talking like a baby rabbit, like a half-size rabbit. They can wiggle through anything. They're just like giant rats, right? And they would just cut these things off. They cut them off about 1.5 feet high, and then eat the very, they'd be after this, just those little tips, right? And they don't do it at this stage of the plant's development. They do it when the plant's like fully formed and starting to get little flower buds and stuff like that. They just show up. Anyway, I'm thinking with this little fence, even if they get in the garden, maybe they won't get at my raspberries. Also, because the raspberries aren't against the fence, maybe it's just less tempting. And they got to sort of cross this no man's land to get to them. More danger. Well, we've got eagles and ospreys and owls here. I see them sometimes in my garden on the fence posts, right? So they're around killing stuff, right? Which is great. Right? Solving my problems for me. This bed here's got nothing in it. I think this is going to be zucchini. Got last year's strawberries coming in here. Bit of weeds here, but I mulched these with leaves in the fall, and they seem to be coming in good. This is going to be maybe eggplant. I think maybe eggplant or zucchini. This bed here wasn't as big last year. I said, why don't I make this bed bigger? And actually this row, I think, which is 4 feet wide, doesn't need to be this wide. I think I'm going to make these rock beds a little wider, all of them, but not now. This fall. Always changing, right? The longer you spend time in a space, you just start rethinking how it's organized. Anyway, that's a whole, I'm not going to get onto that. Anyway, so I got a nice big garden here right in the center of the garden, good light, and I decided to put carrots in. So I've got rows of carrots, and right along the edges where the rocks are, I planted cilantro. That'll come up quick, it'll be harvested, and eventually the carrots, they grow much bigger and they cast a lot of shade. So you can plant carrots with cilantro, but you understand that at some point, if they're planted close anyway, the cilantro will be overwhelmed by the carrots. But that's fine because cilantro grows quickly and you got to harvest it anyway. So yeah, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of carrots. See, and I put these old pieces of wood in the center so I could walk down the middle and access the garden. So really what I've got is 2 beds that are like 2.5 feet wide, right? And I've just got this thing in the middle to access them. So, all my rows are usually spaced 12 to 16 inches apart anyway. So I planted the carrots very close to the wood on either side, right? So it's just good use of the space, right? Here I got a tiny little bed with lettuce. At some point I'll move, I think, tomatoes into this space, right? Because the lettuce will be done by July, right? And also get pond, right? I got a whole video on the pond that it's sort of a complicated video I got to put together, explaining how I did everything. I filmed every stage of making this, working with the concrete, using various applications of chicken wire, everything. Okay, everything's been filmed, at least I think so. So it's a question of editing it all and putting it in video and making a sort of comprehensive video and making a natural pond with no liner, or I guess you could say it has a partial concrete liner, but it's not lined, right? The ground, there's nothing blocking the water from seeping into the ground underneath. It's just the ground, it's such a deep hole that the ground's really, really, really hard, right? It's just clay and rocks, right? The deeper you go, the more dense the clay and rocks are. So it holds water fairly well, right? You get a good rain, this fills right up, and then you might lose 1/2 inch a day, that sort of thing. Anyway, it holds water really well, and I've been using it to water my garden, right? I just got these buckets, right? And I just got these ropes, and I just throw them in the water. I have a little stick I use to press the bucket down. I fill it up, and I usually get my kids out to help me, so they're running back and forth handing buckets to me, and I'm watering it. And with these buckets and with these buckets and my kids helping me, I can actually water the garden more quickly than using a garden hose, because the garden hose is sort of, well, number one, my garden hose doesn't reach everywhere in the garden, and it's annoying to have to wrestle with it. But number two, the garden hose puts water everywhere, right? Whereas these, they just put the water exactly where I want it. And I know how much water I've put on. For any one of these beds with these seedlings, right? Like a normal, not a small bed like this, but like a 4x8 like this one, right? 1 gallon of water is enough. I got to do this later today. Is enough to water the seedlings. So the roots are so shallow, right? So yeah, the pond's been, this is exactly what I'd envisioned, having a water source in the pond. I got more to do with this pond, right? I got more things I want to do. I've got to rig up some sort of fountain type thing. I got a great idea of using a solar device. We're gonna have like, it's gonna be set up so that we're gonna have like a little stream of water trickling in from under the rocks, just like a mountain stream going into a lake. Think about this being a miniature lake, right? So I'll have a thing that pulls water out of the pond and then sends water up here, and it trickles out, gets cooled in there, and it trickles down through there. And hopefully a bunch of different, you know, algae and things like that will start growing along the rocks there and start looking alive, right? And I'm hoping different vining plants and just wild things will find their way down over this. But anyway, enough about the pond. I know you guys aren't crazy about the pond thing. I can just tell by the views. I don't get as many views with the pond stuff as I do with the other stuff, but I think it's cool, so I just put it up anyway, right? These is a beet garden here. You can see they're just coming up. So I planted these maybe 3 weeks later than the other beets, right? Different variety. I got 2 different varieties of beets in the garden. I can't remember what varieties they are, but I tried some new ones. I think these are actually, what's it called? I can't remember. Sorry. Taunus, T-A-U-N-U-S, Taunus, that's what it's called. I think these are the Taunus. They're sort of a longer type of beet. Great for pickling and easy to peel instead of the round ones, right? Anyway, so this is beets, right? This should get enough sun to grow pretty good beets, right? Nothing here. This is going to be squash. I got a big, you know, whatever this is, 8x8 bed, right? Just squash and mulch. Just gonna let it. There's lots of room to move, right? This is I don't know what I'm going to plant here, but something that likes a lot of sun. Like peppers. This is where the peppers are going. Yes, peppers, I believe. Now last year I had like a whole different kind of arrangement here with a tree and a weird garden underneath the tree that had asparagus that never did well. So this year I violently pulled out all the asparagus that were outside of the confines of this new bed and jammed them back in the ground. I have no idea. I'm just going to wait and see what happens here. We got a couple of asparagus coming out of the ground here. I really don't know how well this will do. If you're wondering what these are doing, I just have these on when I pick these things up and carry them. I put a couple of these cross braces on just so that the thing doesn't trapezoid while I'm moving it around and you know being rough with it, trying to get a position in the garden. I haven't pulled these off yet. But anyway, this is an asparagus bed. We'll see what happens. I was pretty rough with the asparagus. I've set my expectations low for this year anyway. Now we get this beautiful, the fruit garden, right? With some things that aren't fruit, I guess. I built this nice trellis for the grapes, right? So the grapes were very, very roughly moved last fall. And then this spring I pulled them out and moved them again because I thought they were in the wrong spot. And if something's in the wrong spot, you got to move it. And even if moving kills it, it doesn't matter. If it's in the wrong spot, it's in the wrong spot. Anyway, moving didn't kill it because these little buds were not formed a couple weeks ago. So the buds are forming, right? The plant's alive. I don't know if everything survived, right? But I've got, you know, I lost a lot. The original plant would have easily had enough canes to fill this trellis, or whatever you want to call this, right? But a lot of that got cut off and removed when I was moving the plant because it was just impossible to deal with the plant, and a lot of them were sort of like stuck. I had it growing against the exterior fence, right? And a lot of the canes were sort of grown into the fence, so I had to cut them to remove the plant. I couldn't preserve them. There was only a couple that I could get off the fence that weren't sort of grown into it, right? Anyway, this survived. It's alive. It's growing. All the blueberries that I moved, you can see, right? They're all budding out. They all made it. Some of these I did a really good job of moving them. I took a nice big root ball, and some of them I literally ripped them out of the ground. So they all seem to be okay. I came out here, I didn't film it, I should have. Every year when I prune my blueberries, I don't film it, and I always kick myself for not filming it. I give them a light pruning, but I don't know how many blueberries I'm going to get this year. But I mean, these were all growing in like a clump last year. Right? And now I've got this nice row, right? And I even removed plants. I gave away about 6 plants, right? So I had more plants growing in less space. Now I've got less plants growing in more space, right? And it's going to be really easy to pick them and access them. And I just think this is going to work out better. I'm just hoping the ones I gave away and the ones I kept, I still have 2 varieties of blueberry, because you got to have 2 varieties for them to cross-pollinate. I'm pretty sure this one is a different type than those. It just looks different. It's taller, it's straighter, it's just different. Its buds aren't as far along, right? These haven't opened. These have, right? All the buds have opened on these ones. These ones haven't opened yet. Okay, so I think this one is a different variety. So I think I've got 2 varieties. one plant of one kind and a whole bunch of, hopefully it'll all work out. Ideally, I'd have a bit more variety. Maybe I can propagate something from one of these. Anyway, over here, I got my original apple tree. This is the Sweet 16. You can see it's opened up and it's starting to flower a little bit, right? So that survived just fine. Pear tree. I had 2 pear trees. One was really, really sad because it was planted in the wrong place and it was too wet. It's about 1/3 the size of this one. This one's growing really nice. I only had room in my garden for 3 trees, and I really wanted apple trees. So I put the other pear tree on another part of my property, sort of on the edge of one of my lawns, on my backyard lawn. Hopefully some moose or deer doesn't come along and just eat it. right? But, you know, we'll see what happens if these, you know, actually grow enough and pollinate and produce pears. We'll see. But this is the other apple tree that I got. I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. I ordered this from Vessie's, and I planted it, I don't know, a month ago. Okay, and you can see this is what they call a bare root whip. We've got videos on how to plant these. When they arrive in the box, it looks like a stick with dry roots. Looks dead. You plant it, you spread the roots out, and you plant it properly, and eventually it starts growing, right? And this nice tree was one of those 3 years ago. In fact, it was an even bigger tree before I moved it. I can't remember what happened, but we cut off this. This was the biggest, or this was the main, I think this was the main leader, central leader of the tree. But I can't remember what happened, but it got broken, or maybe all the bark got ripped off. I can't remember, something happened and we had to remove this entire branch, right? So we removed, by removing this one piece, we removed 1/3 of the tree, right? Anyway, 3 years ago, this nice tree was just a little stick like that, right? I should really put a ribbon around this so I don't step on it, or so one of my kids don't step on it and break it. Pretty vulnerable. And finally over here we've got the Hascap berries, right? They're all leafing, or in bloom, right? So I'm guessing they're early. And we got the lovage, right? Lovage is finally up. I moved this a number of years ago. This used to be 6 feet high, and then I moved it, and it kind of suffered a little bit. But hopefully I'll get good results this year, right? And you can move lovage, right? So it's coming in pretty good. Lovage is sort of like a, not sort of like, it is a celery. It's very, very strong tasting celery. You can't use it like for putting peanut butter on and stuff like that, but you cut it, one piece of it like that is all you'd need in a stir fry or any dish that calls for celery. It's got a really strong celery taste, right? So you put one of these in your garden and you don't need to buy celery for the entire summer, right? Or maybe more. So I mean, the original plant I had would grow 6 feet high and it was huge. I mean, literally more than you could possibly use. All right. More hascaps here. And here I've got my Saskatoons stuffed in this corner next to these. I mean, these really haven't got enough space, but this is where they are. This is where they're going to stay. They're growing much better here than they were. I had them basically planted where that pond is. The reason the pond is over there is because everything I planted over there sucked. So I said, this isn't a good place for a garden. It's probably a great place. And the main reason why this spot did not work well for a garden is that it was against the hill, so it got shade. And because it was against the hill, it had a lot of water. So too wet, not sunny enough. Sounds like a good spot for a pond. The fish aren't out today, not yet. They'll come out when it warms up. But you can see already, I don't know if you can see, but there's skipjacks on the pond, right? So I mean, life's already finding its way in there. We got to get some more pond plants and some things like that going in here to help, you know, purify the water and that sort of thing. But that'll all get done over the next month or so. I was going to mention mulch. So even though I didn't collect a lot of mulch last fall, this spring, on my way home from work, I would just drive through the residential part. I work in the city. Instead of driving on the main arteries, I just weave through the residential parts on days where I know there's leaf pickup. And I got lots and lots of bags of leaves just stored outside the garden. And to get all this done, I got some wood chips from a tree service. So I told these guys I'd give them a plug in my video. If you live in the Halifax area and you need wood chips, check out All Green Tree Care. I'll put their sort of logo and email address up on the screen. They're not going to give them to you for free because they got to deliver them and all that sort of stuff. In order for them to have the wood chips such that they're ideal wood chips for using in a garden, it's a little more work for them than just firing stuff in the truck and dumping it later on. And of course there's the fuel cost of delivery and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, you give them a call if you need some wood chips. If you need a lot, I mean, it's a big truck. They dump a lot. It's enough to mulch this whole area. Right, I got 2 loads, so I got some left over. Right, you notice all my beds are everything where I could put wood. Oh, this bed here. I didn't mention these beds. Shoot. I'll do that in a second. Anyway, all the wood chips I got, right? I got a lot of them because I needed to do this, but then I got some more because I wanted to do some walking paths on the property, and I wanted to use them to mulch my gardens. I did not want to run into mulch this summer like I did last summer. I did a whole video on that last summer about beds that weren't mulched and how poorly they performed. Not going to be in that situation this year. I got lots of wood chips. I got lots of leaves. It's all going to work out fine. Yeah, I didn't mention these beds. This is onion sets. I just put the onion sets down and I put, about an inch of mulch over them. You can see the onions are, I mean, that was about a week ago, and you can see they're coming up already, right? So this will be a nice onion bed. Eventually these two, this garlic bed and this onion bed, you can see over here I've got strawberry. Okay, so the long-term plan is for all 3 of these beds to be strawberry. And so all the fruit, I know I've got strawberries growing over there, right? But the long-term plan is for all the fruit to be on this side. It's nice and sunny, right? So I have the strawberries over here, right? So I'll have these sort of 2 zones in the garden, the wood chip fruit place with the bushes and the trees, and the hot, sandy vegetable garden that gets all this nice heat, right? I think that'll work out great. Anyway, that's where we are, May 2023. Garden's coming along great. You know, I'm sure some people are further along than me with the height of their plants, but it's just been cold here. We've had some warm days, but we've also had some cold. We're having some warm days, but then we're having these super cold nights where everything just shuts down, getting frost and that sort of thing. But you know, everything's coming along great. I'm really happy with the way the new garden looks. So I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you want to help support everything I'm doing here, go to Vessies.com to buy whatever you need for your garden this year. And use my coupon code GAVS23 to get free shipping as long as there's a pack of seeds in the order and there's no oversized items in the order. Check out the description box of this video for details. You can buy everything you need from Vessies. They have seeds, fruit bushes and trees, soil amendments, pest solutions, tools, clothing, and lots of other stuff too. So yeah, if you want to help support everything I'm doing here and they sell something you need, buy it from them using my coupon code. And happy gardening.